A big thank you comes to you today from Dead Rabbit via Patreon for his long support of the channel. Tekuthal versus Azusa, with a pretty slow hand against Azusa. Isn't very intelligent, but don't tend to draw a lot of ramp in this deck. Might not have enough. Might have to rework the deck a little bit. Anyway, we'll keep that. Just a colourless land for our opponent, and we get into a land of our own, so that's good. And at the end of our turn, they use Ash Barrens to go basic land cycling. Okay, and that takes them into Llanowar Elves, so I imagine they were struggling on coloured mana there, which has cost them a turn. Unusual for Azusa. And there we see our first piece of ramp in the extra planar lens, which isn't necessarily good to see early on. Get down the Ledger Shredder. And now we see a very slow turn 3 Azusa from our opponent. Sure he'll make great use of it though. Only getting out an Urborg there. We draw into another land. Yeah, I'm not minding all this mana off the top. So I think in order to keep up with Azusa, we have to try the extra planar lens. I mean, Azusa's a really strong, powerful deck, so no shame in losing to it, and we likely do if they have removal for the extra planar lens. Might as well swing in with the Ledger Shredder as well. Don't mind taking any commander damage to Azusa. Okay, there's a potent combination, Courser of Kruphix. Azusa normally has close to 60 lands in it, so there's every chance that you rip into a bunch of lands off the top. And there's one. We see the Scavenger Grounds for exiling graveyards, not all that worried about that. Balaged Recovery can be played as a tap land as well, and they do. Then it's a Snow Forest as well, and revealing a Mana Vault on top, which not sure how useful that's going to be to them with all this mana, but they peck us for 1 point of commander damage anyway. And alright, another island. We're getting really lucky with all this mana on top of our library. So I think it's intelligent to continue to ramp here, the Midnight Clock into play. And then we'll get down the Simic Manipulator so that we can steal away the Azusa so that it can't continue to deal quite as much damage. Ledger Shredder triggers on our second spell. And we draw it into a Gruul Lurker. That would be useful if we were going much faster than this, but don't think we're going to have time for it against Azusa, unfortunately. Putting a plus counter on the Ledger Shredder either way. So swinging with that for 2 damage. Oof, and then our opponent has a Worldly Tutor, 2 cards in hand, but is about to put a creature on top. And that's a Kogler, so they can certainly fight something out of the way here. Draw into Kogler and reveal Uncharted Realms. So of course, just playing out the Kogler, they can fight a creature out of the way, and alright, they don't take the Simic Manipulator. Swinging straight through us and dealing 3 to us there, knocking us down to 36, and not sure how much longer the Midnight Clock is going to last. Although I suppose they go for the extra planar lens first. Drawing into a Corrupted Conscience this time, so we can gain control of that Kogler with that. Yeah, so thanks to the double mana on our land, we can go for the enchantment first to get some more devotion to blue. Take control of the Kogler, making it a big infect creature. And then we'll have more devotion for Nykthos. So that means that we can play our commander as well this turn. And that makes all the difference because I want the Fierce Guardianship held up for free on the Realms Uncharted. It also means that we get a plus counter on the Simic Manipulator, so we can remove a counter from this and gain control of Azusa, because it's power that cares about. So I think we remove the Azusa from play now, before they reveal a pocket of lands off the top. It's not necessarily as much the mana you concern yourself with against Azusa, although that is frightening. But it's the utility lands. They can get a lot done with utilities in the Azusa deck, so yeah, the least number of land drops they can make, the better. They draw into Realms Uncharted and reveal a fetch land off the top, casting the Realms Uncharted straight away, so we'll definitely counter that. Don't want them going for any tutors. So 2 cards left in hand. And they slam down a Tireless Tracker, which is a means of card draw for them. Very, very versatile deck, this. And then playing the fetch from the top of the library will get them a clue token, revealing another fetch on top. Alright, and that's a means of proliferate for us, so Sword of Truth and Justice likely goes on our commander here. We'll get down the Toothy for more proliferate shenanigans and devotion to blue. And that will evolve the Simic Manipulator as well. Looking to steal away the Centaur, I think. Anyway, we have Devotion of 8, so 8 mana from the Sword of Truth and Justice, and we're going empty-handed. But we'll be able to start proliferating more onto the Midnight Clock. So equip up our flying commander. And then we've got 3 mana left, so like I said, dump that into the midnight clock to put another counter on it. Takes us up to 5 on there. And then we swing in with Kogla, which is a big infector. We can force them to use the clue token. Swing in with our commander, go straight over the top. And they crack the Verdant Catacombs in response to the Kogla trigger, which reveals a Life from the Loam on top. They've just tutored out a Dryad Arbor, no doubt for blocks. Tireless Tracker makes another clue token, they gain a life to landfall. And then cracking the clue will draw them into Life from the Loam. A plus counter on the Tireless Tracker as well, might be relevant to us if we can gain control of it. Alright, and it's another tutor in the Green Sun Zenith. So that'll be the 3rd one this game. Do land 5 points of commander damage though, which means we can put a plus counter. We'll put it on the Simic Manipulator, gain control of even more powerful creatures. So it's obviously proliferate twice, leaving the Simic Manipulator at 4 plus counters, 7 counters on the midnight clock. And I'm just going to take control of the Tireless Tracker now before they make land drops and are able to respond with cracking clue tokens and all the rest of it, because they could make that ability fizzle if we're not careful. Okay, so just casting the Green Sun Zenith straight away. X is 7. I thought they might go for a Rex Sage or something, but sure there's plenty of potent creatures at mana value 7 that they could make use of. Alright, that's an Avenger of Zendikar, so 7 plant tokens in the way there. Playing a Snow Forest off the top and revealing a Gaia's Cradle, of course. Toothy getting its first plus counter, thanks to us drawing a card this turn. And we draw into Seagate Restoration, which couldn't be any worse, thanks to it being the only card in our hand. So we'll just go through to combat here. I'll try and get my opponent to block with all these plant tokens. Not sure he will, but hopefully he'll gang up on the Kogla to get rid of it. Might be worth him leaving it in play because he'll be able to get into enchantment removal at some point, I imagine. Anyway, Kogla going after that clue token could make all the difference, so that he can't clear a non-land off the top. Can't afford to crack it in response. And yeah, our opponent just chumps with a plant. There's no evasion on the Kogla, unfortunately. Sword of Truth and Justice continues to trigger, putting our opponent on 10 points of commander though. We'll put a plus counter on the Simic Manipulator again. Ready to continue to take things off our opponent. And then we proliferate a couple of times, of course, thanks to our commander. So the midnight clock is at 11 currently. And we might as well throw the land into play here. Not going to bother taking the damage because I think we'll have enough mana with the Nykthos, so hopefully we do. Triggers the Tireless Tracker for a clue token. And then we get 8 mana again from the Nykthos. So let's crack a clue token first. I suppose I could have just gone for the midnight clock actually, that might have been a waste of mana. Anyway, another plus counter on the Tireless Tracker. Okay, and there is a Tamiyo, so yeah, don't mind playing Tamiyo. Unfortunately our opponent hasn't swung in with all these plant tokens, so doesn't have a bunch of tap creatures. But we can freeze the Avenger of Zendikar. Don't think there's much point in freezing any mana. Could go for the Dork or a land, but I think putting the Avenger of Zendikar to sleep is fine here. Well, potentially some wasted mana there, but I don't mind having a Walker in play. We'll tap down at the midnight clock for a mana before we lose it, because we're going to put the final counter onto it here. And so we shuffle everything around. That is a one-sided wheel for us. And we do get into more lands, and thanks to having Azusa in play, we can play a couple more here. So drop the 2 more lands. And those trigger the Tireless Tracker for more clue tokens. Extra planar lands really shining here. So that can be 3 mana into Astral Cornucopia, which obviously has it enter with 1 charge counter on it, but that's only going to get better as the game progresses. And we can go for Jace the Mind Sculptor as well, and I think I'm going to Fate Seal that Gaia's Cradle away. I think that would be an intelligent idea for us. It puts our opponent closer to something else potentially, but I think ticking up and putting that Gaia's Cradle on the bottom of the library is the thing to do here. And of course we just reveal a Strip Mine off the top. Yeah, it's likely that you'll see scary lands with Azusa. Now seeing Ramunap on top of the library, they've drawn into the Strip Mine and going for Life from the Loam before the Strip Mine. So getting a Fetch and Ash Barrens and the Dryad Arbor back. They can still only make 1 land a turn though. I think us stealing the Azusa has been absolutely detrimental to our opponent in hindsight. Okay, so there's an Ash Barons. So they're going to shuffle away that Ramunap. Getting rid of the clue token was relevant as well, I think, because I'm sure they'd like a Ramunap available to them. So in response, let's not allow our opponent to see the top of the library, and we'll steal away the Courser of Krufix, revealing a land on the top of our library. So we're going to start ramping Azusa style here by the looks of it. Activating War Room to draw a card. And then they've got an Ulamog the Infinite Gaia on the stack somehow. So they'll shuffle their graveyard into library. Yeah, not sure how that happened, to be honest. Not sure how they've managed to get Ulamog into the bin. Shows how relevant getting rid of that Gaia's Cradle was, though, because it might be that they couldn't have afforded the Ulamog there. Anyway, a fetch being played into the Avenger of Zendikar. And then cracking Verdant Catacombs will trigger the Avenger of Zendikar again, making some 3/4 plant tokens. Oh, that must be what it was. They dredged the Life from the Loam back into their hand with the War Room and milled some Eldrazi. Yeah, that must have been what they did. Alright, and our opponent's scooping at that. Yeah, could get rid of our Planeswalkers, most likely, with those plant tokens, but that would entail tapping down some creatures, which maybe we could have Tamiyo survive and draw a bunch of cards then. Also, if they tapped out to try and get rid of the Planeswalkers, we just swing back with massive creatures. So, yeah, they're in a pretty rough spot there. Really didn't think we were going to do well against Azusa there, and we had a Blighted Agent as well to start putting a bunch of plus counters on that and threatening Infect. So yeah, did a lot better than I thought we would against Azusa. We'll play one more this video, I think. Tekuthal versus Atali. And that is a one-lander, which is a shame because we've got Wayfarer's Bauble, but we'll have to mulligan. Okay, I very much like the Sapphire Medallion there, so we will pass at that. Alright, as soon as my opponent tapped for mana there, I was expecting some fast mana. Atali always tends to get into the fast mana somehow. But it is a Relic of Progenitus. We will drop our second land for the Sapphire Medallion. Well, luckily there's not much counter magic in the deck, but there's a Cavern of Souls for our opponent, which suggests that things are going to go swimmingly, and yeah, there's a Grim Monolith as well, so there's the fast mana I was worried about. We draw into Thran Dynamo on turn 3, so I think we'll just try going for a 2 mana Tezzeret's Gambit here, so 2 mana 2 life, and we'll just try and get something going here. Could go for Experimental Augury after this as well, although there is a Thrumming Bird, so yep, that's the one to go for. Get Summoning Sickness away from that as soon as possible. At the end of the turn, Relic of Progenitus, having us exile our graveyard. Don't think we have any graveyard interaction in the deck, so not that worried about that. Our opponent manages to make the third land, so down comes Atali. And our days are numbered here against that thing. Managing to make another land off the top. I think we just have to take a turn off, unfortunately, and go for the Thran Dynamo so that we've got more things that we can do. We could draw with Seagate Restoration, maybe, if we're desperate. But it's really slow. Might as well swing in with the Thrumming Bird and deal a point of damage. And that opens up Atali to swing straight in at us, which we weren't going to block anyway. Grabbing, yep, there's that fast mana, what did I say? Onerophage as well, so yeah, they're going to be drawing cards and putting plus counters on that. That thing is a flyer, so it blocks the Thrumming Bird. That's probably one of the best creatures they could have got from us, really. Throwing out a Darksteel Ingot as well. Okay, there's an Evacuation, which can slow our opponent down. It can give us our creature back as well. I think it's just worth going for the Seagate Restoration here. We're going a bit too slow against the red player for my liking, but we really need to get into some good cards here. Alright, so no max hand size for the rest of the game. We've got Counter Magic, the Contagion Engine we know is really good in this deck. So let's just try to get the Ikamoon Gauntlet going here. Relic of Progenitus in response to get rid of our only card in the graveyard. And we just have to pass through to our opponent, no sense in proliferating anyway. And the first plus counter goes on the Onerophage. Oof, and there's a Karn from our opponent as well. So ironically, getting rid of the Ikamoon Gauntlet takes them down to 3 loyalty. Not sure we can get rid of this Karn, unfortunately. Could play a threat into it to encourage them to tick down and kill it off. Anyway, Atali swinging in here. They have a Vesuva from themselves and a basic from us. So we'll go up to 12 points of commander. Alright, drawing into a Midnight Clock, so I think it's fine to go for a 2-mana Midnight Clock, seeing as how it is effectively only 1 mana because it does tap for a mana itself. Throw out the land, and we'll go for the evacuation here so that we can buy ourselves time against that Atali. This will allow us to play out both creatures again as well, so the Neurophage comes in under our control, and out comes the Thrumming Bird, ready to hopefully proliferate next turn. Midnight Clock gets its first counter, and our opponent untaps the Mana Vault, so no Atali this turn. Yeah, and unfortunately Karn ticking up to us here, so we have to get rid of a card, but also it makes it way more difficult to get rid of. Relic of Progenitus, alright, they're tapping down the Mana Vault, curiously. So drawing a card to the Relic and exiling our graveyard. Got themselves into a land and a Mind Stone, and leaving the turn at that, they can't untap the Grim Monolith either, so... The first counter on the Neurophage, we draw into Sword of Truth and Justice. We tend to get into that card a lot in this deck, which you won't find me complaining about. So get down our commander, ready for proliferating. It is relevant now. Play out the sword. The sword can go onto the Thrumming Bird. And now we've got the Fierce Guardianship held up as well. So swinging at Karn with the Neurophage. And we'll have to hit an opponent with the Thrumming Bird so that we can start proliferating. Both the Thrumming Bird and the sword need to hit an opponent. So it's Thrumming Bird on the stack first. The Sword of Truth and Justice can put a plus counter onto our commander. And then we proliferate twice from the sword, putting more plus counters and counters on the Midnight Clock. And then it's twice again with the Thrumming Bird, certainly not going to put more counters on the Karn. Alright, so now hopefully we've got some threats to encourage the Karn to tick down so that we can get rid of it next turn. Not untapping the Mana Vault this time, taking 1 damage to it. And they tick down on the Neurophage, which is about as good as we could have hoped for with that. I think that is the worst permanent they could have chosen, to be honest. Maybe our commander would have been slightly worse because we can just replay it. Ah, that's the plan. Okay, fair enough. Our opponent goes for Pia and Kieran Nalaar. So they're going to have a couple of flying blockers in the way to protect the Karn. So our opponent's plan makes total sense now. Unfortunately for them, they don't know that we've got the Contagion Engine in hand, so this is going to continue to do work for us. We can afford to proliferate with it as well. So Contagion Engine into play, and we point that at our opponent, getting rid of the Thopter tokens. A Manus counter on Pia and Kieran. And now we can finish off the Karn thanks to it ticking down last turn. That'll have to be commander damage on the Karn, because we want to hold up mana for the Contagion Engine, meaning we can't re-equip the sword. Thrumming Bird, of course, hitting our opponent. Okay, and Pia and Kieran sacrificing the Mana Vault in order to deal 2 damage to us. Not sure that's the thing to do there, really, although they've been pretty slow with that fast mana, thankfully. It's been a bit of a glass cannon set of mana for our opponent. Anyway, Sword of Truth and Justice resolving first again, so plus counter on the Thrumming Bird this time. And then proliferate twice, of course. I'm only just looking at it now, actually. We're going to have the Midnight Clock hit 12 here, so argument to be made for us getting down the Agent for 1 mana and not proliferating with Contagion Engine, because I'm sure we'll draw into a land off the clock, so probably should have got the Agent down. Anyway, the clock strikes 12, and we get the one-sided wheel again. And there's the land, only got 1 though. So let's go for 2 mana into the Ever-Flowing Chalice. And that's obviously another good proliferate target for us, ramps us nicely over the course of the game. And we can go for Teferi, Master of Time as well. So tick that up during this turn, will be a loot, and yeah, the Nesting Grounds has done work for us in previous games, but I don't think it's as good here. But we'll get rid of the Wizard class anyway. Might be able to go for an indestructible counter onto the Tekuthal. Alright, our opponent continuing to go slow thanks to the mana issues. That is a Caged Sun, which will fix their mana issues next turn. Throwing out a Witchbane Orb as well. I don't think Hexproof on themselves matters against us, unless we do start getting Infect on them, then it'll count. Because obviously we won't be able to proliferate them with Infect while they've got Hexproof. Now that they've tapped out, we'll tick up the Teferi again, and we can loot away a basic land. Alright, Interferi digging us down 2 cards there. Since it's been in play is relevant because it gets us into the Corrupted Conscience. Typically speaking, we want to steal away a big evasive creature with that from our opponent, so it pulls double duty for us, but there's no danger in putting that on our commander while it is north of 10 power. So we'll do that, give our commander Infect, and turns out the Witchbane Orb against Infect didn't really matter. Yeah, and our opponent scoots before taking the damage. That would have been Infect on our opponent. It would have been getting pretty close to commander damage as well, actually. So if we didn't get them this turn, it likely would have been next turn. Anyway, hopefully you all enjoyed this Tekuthal gameplay. I was looking forward to playing this ever since I saw it spoiled, and it hadn't disappointed. It's not a tier 1 commander or anything, but it is a really fun and unique one for mono blue. So hopefully you all enjoyed it. Be sure to leave it a thumbs up if you did. Huge thank you to the patrons for their constant support of the channel. I'm tribalkai. Thank you for watching.